Okay, and thanks, Mandy. You can see the GP 2018 slide.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I was having trouble getting it into presentation mode here. So, okay, hello everyone, and thanks for attending. We're going to today spend some time with touring around Dynamics GP 2018. This is the latest and greatest release of Microsoft Dynamics GP, or what used to be called Great Plains back in the day from Microsoft. And this product is 15 days old today. So it was released on December 1st. So it's a brand new release. Of course, the Dynamics GP product is not at all new, but this is the most current release from Microsoft. And we're not going to spend too much time with slides. There's some things that I do want to call out as far as system requirements, and then the rest of the time we'll spend in the software. And so 2018 being a brand new version does have some system requirements that are important to note. So on the workstation, on the client side of where the software would be running, Windows 7, Windows 8, or 8.1, or Windows 10. And so not uncommon, shouldn't be any surprises there, but no Windows XP or anything older like that. Microsoft originally was not going to support this on Windows 7, but then they, I think, looked up to see how many millions or hundreds of millions of Windows 7 machines are still running out there, and decided that they needed to test and certify 2018 to run on Windows 7. So 7, 8, any flavor of 8 or 10, and you would be good to go. Office, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so forth, version 2013 or 2016 are supported on Dynamics GP 2018. So again, nothing, you know, you get back to Office 2010 or way back, you probably would need to upgrade that. But if you're going to run Dynamics GP 2018, anything that's probably current shipping product for Office, you would be fine. And Adobe, if you decide to use that for PDF creation, and Adobe is not required for PDF functionality inside of the software, but it is kind of the de facto one out there that most people use. But Adobe 10 is the current supported version. And then if you're going to virtualize any of your systems, and again, that's not required, but if you decide to virtualize, of course, the HyperV product is Microsoft's virtualized server system. It runs on pretty much anything else. I don't know personally that we've ever seen a virtualized server operating system that GP will not run on. And of course, Microsoft is not going to test competing products like VMware and so forth, but there are many, many of those out there. It should run just fine on everything. It's tested on their own HyperV product. Okay, and HyperV, by the way, can be server or desktop, much like VMware or just about anything else that's virtual out there. SQL Server, though, if you're going to run Dynamics GP 2018, you would want to be on either SQL Server 2014 or SQL Server 2016. And the enterprise version, of course, is supported. The standard version is supported. Dynamics GP also runs on the Express version of 2014 or 16, and SQL Express is free. It does have some limitations, obviously, but it is free. And so, you know, that's if you have a small system, that's a good way to get started, where you don't have to necessarily invest in the standard or enterprise versions. There may be reasons that we want to do that, but Express is out there for your downloading pleasure. Okay, we won't talk too much about the operating systems, but how to get there. So sometimes there's people on the product tours that are on an older version of Dynamics GP, and so I always like to mention that if you are an existing Dynamics GP user that just have curiosity about 2018, well, you would have to be on GP 2015 or 2016, and that includes the R2 versions, but you see the exact version numbers there for 15 and for 16 in the lower part of the slide. You can go directly from those versions to GP 2018, there's an upgrade path. If you're on GP 2013 or earlier, there's not a direct upgrade path, but all that means is if you're on 13, we would go from 13 to either 15 or 16, one of these supported versions, and then on to 2018. If you're on something older than 2013, maybe GP 2010 or GP 10, then that's kind of an extra jump or hop to get to 2018. But it is possible. It's just not one kind of direct path. And so, but we can always get you to the current version, no matter what version you're on. And so with that, then I will close out the slides, and I'm going to reshare the screen. Actually, I'll just move it over here. So, okay, so you all should see my Dynamics GP 2018. I've logged in today as a system administrator, and why is that important? Well, there's no security being applied to my account. So keep that in mind, that as we go through this, everything is unlocked. In real life, we know that's not always the case, but as the SA or admin account, as it is, nothing is outside of my grasp here. And so when I log in, I do land on my home page. And if some of you are on an older version of GP, some of this will look familiar because this home page has been up here for a number of years now. But this home page really is for me to personalize my experience with the system. So we all do different things in the product. We all have different roles or different jobs in the organization. And so the home page really allows me to kind of customize, if you will, or personalize the software so that those things that I work with on a regular basis are on my home page. And we would all have a different home page layout. And so we'll start up here kind of in the to-do area. And by the way, these tiles can be moved around. And so if you don't like the arrangement that I have, you're free to move things around to your own liking. And of course, if there's things that you would not be using in the system, then you just wouldn't put those on your homepage. And so your homepage might be a lot simpler than mine, or it could be a little busier than mine. So in the to-do area, this is the system kind of providing reminders for me, and these are unique to me, to my user account. So if there's tasks that I have to do, or maybe a task that someone has assigned me to do, those would show up on my homepage so that I have a reminder there to do something. If there's a workflow task, workflow meaning maybe I have an approval to make, maybe I've sent a transaction out for approval, and I want to kind of monitor if it's where it is, if it's been approved or if it's still pending. If I happen to be an approver and log into the system, then those transactions would be available for me here on my homepage. And so there's other things, though, that we have here, these hyperlinked reminders. So these are really the software kind of thinking for us and using some of its own intelligence to provide information back to us. And so, yes, I could go run a report to see which receivables are due today. So very, very common. Yes, I could go run a report and see which customers are over their credit limit. And so, and that's kind of the old way of doing things, is having to go ask. But in a Microsoft world or in a Dynamics GP world, it's better really to have the system tell us when those things are happening. And so those things that are important to me, I would set up as reminders. And so because these are hyperlinks back down into the data, you'll see that I can easily drill back in. When I click on the customers over their credit limit, I can drill back in and see, who those customers are and what's going on with their balances. Once I open this query window, you'll notice it's labeled SmartList up at the very top left here. I have the Excel functionality, and so I can click on any column and sort any of this data. And so you can imagine in the real world, you might have more than just a handful of customers here. And so I have a chance to review the information. I might want to make some changes to it, but I can highlight any of these records, and then I can drill down into the system, and so where I might want to end up. I can also export this data out. So if I want to export this kind of SmartList out, maybe change it up a little bit, or put it on another computer. So maybe I have created this view, but somebody else in the company, or maybe a brother, sister company wants it. I can export this out and they can import it and run it against their set of data. And so, but once I highlight a record, I can drill back again, keep in mind security is in place here. And so, you know, if I want to go back and view that customer information, you'll see that I can easily with one click get back into that, and we'll come back to that screen here in another minute or two. But you know, I might want to look back at the customer's payment history here, and so maybe see kind of what they have going. So I can drill down into their receivables kind of summary here. I can look at their credit limit, which is the 50,000 you see in the window. I can look at their terms. But as a credit manager, the accounting manager or CFO, I might be interested in seeing, you know, what these guys, how they pay us, and so what they've charged. I see here their year-to-date, high balance, and life-to-date. Of course, in my sample system here, it's not very creative, and so those numbers end up being the same. And I see that they pay in an average of 30 days. So, you know, payment terms are net 30, they're paying in 30, so pretty much sticking to the established credit policy. So for whatever reason, I've let them go beyond their $50,000 limit, so I must be somewhat okay with them as a customer. But maybe I want to send out a notice and say, hey, we're just going to up your credit limit here. And I might want to do that for all of these customers that are listed. So I can use Microsoft Word, and I can prepare a customer letter. And so the little wizard opens up here, and you'll notice a number of letter templates here. There's 60 or 70 of these that come with the software out of the box. You can edit any of these templates that Microsoft has built, so they're completely free for you to do with as you please. You can create unlimited templates of your own, or you could just use theirs. If you really like it, you could use theirs out of the box, which is what I'm doing today. So here's a letter template that is an adjustment to the credit limit. And so, and when I select that, you'll see it pulls the list that I have queried out here from the SmartList window. Well, you know, maybe these guys, I'm not gonna adjust their limit. It's just these four that I kind of really like. And so, well, then how do you want those letters to be signed? And so I'll fix the spelling of my name and give myself a title, phone, email, whatever I want to do. And when I click finish, then we do a merge between the Dynamics GP ERP data and Microsoft Word. And so that opened on my second screen. And so we'll drag this back over. And so for those four customers that I had up on my screen that I had selected, I get the Word template. And again, these are Word documents, so I could print these off, I could parse them out and email them, or fax them if you still do faxing. However I normally communicate with these customers, I have the ability to get this then in their hands. And of course, you know, this is Microsoft Word, and so once I'm over in Word, I do anything I would normally do in Word, you know, change the font, or I might want to add to the letter, for example. I could type additional information on one of them if I really wanted to. And so, but very, very simple to use the accounting data with, in this case, the Word part of Microsoft Office, and take some kind of action on the data that we're looking at, because, you know, the accounting system's pretty good at identifying situations, but in this case we need communication out to the customers to be able to do something with their account. So tucking kind of that off to the side and looking behind the scenes, kind of under the hood here, you'll see a number of different folders or views into the system. And of course, you'd only see the things that you had security to. And so, you know, I could run a list of vendors, for example, and this list might be okay if I was going to send out a holiday card, but otherwise doesn't really give me too much information there. So the power of this query tool, where we can all kind of build our own reports and queries if we want to, is the ability to come in and change up what the window looks like. And so I'm going to take some things off of here. Maybe I don't care about vendor ID. I kind of know them by name, and I've got their address there, and then maybe add some fields. So maybe I want to look, we're getting down towards the end of the year here. I want to see if these vendors have 1099 requirements. So if we paid them more than the $600 limit, well, that's fine. Do I have their tax ID number on file? Because if I don't, in another month, I'm going to need that to send them their tax form. And so there's their tax ID number. So I'm going to grab the 1099 type and amount and their tax ID number. And well, you know, the 1099 amount is pretty important. So I'm going to put that right up here by vendor name. And so here, yeah, we can see, let me make that a little bit bigger. We can see, you know, kind of a bunch of stuff here. Some of it doesn't apply at all. So really what I need to do is just filter this a little bit to get to those vendors that I would consider problems. And so I can use the search capability here and put up to 4 different layers or levels of search on. So here I'm going to say, if I'm even issuing a 1099, and I'm going to mark that as equal to miscellaneous, then have I paid them enough money to actually send them a 1099? And so we'll say if the dollar amount, and we'll say is greater than the $600 requirement, then my problem is if I don't have the tax ID number is where I'm in trouble. So I'm just going to say if the tax ID number is equal to 0, and then click OK. And so here are some actual problems that are in the system. And so, well, I need to monitor this now because I've identified the problems, but I want to know when these are no longer problems. So I'm going to create a favorite, and we'll just call it Demo 1099 list. And I'm going to make that available to everybody in the system, so everybody would be able to come in and look at that, not just me. But I want to set a reminder on my home page, and I want that reminder to show up if the number of records, so if there's anybody that is on the list, if the number of records is greater than 0. And so that at the same time creates a favorite. So if I come back to my vendor query here and I see Demo 1099 list, all I have to do is click on that and it populates the data. And so that'll show up here under my reminders in just a few minutes. It does take a few seconds for the home page to refresh on my laptop here. So we'll come back to that in a second. In the meantime, though, let's take a look at the charts here. And so we see this little plugin application really is looking at the data under the hood and then doing some analysis to it and presenting back a large amount of the data in graphical format. And there's a couple hundred of these that come with the system. Same rule applies. You can create anything you want report-wise and plug in here in the form of a chart or a graph, or you could see raw data. And so I have no new employee detail. But a lot of people use the graphical part of this as a key performance indicator, or KPI as we call it. But here's some raw data. It's summarized though, so I'm just looking at cash this period versus this period last year to see kind of how cash is trailing along. So it looks like last year was not too bad. This year, you know, it's better, but quite a bit better actually. But I'm still you know, had a problem last period, so I ran out of money. Well, what's that look like in a chart format? You know, here's my checkbook balance and going into the negative there. And so for cash, that's not the direction the graph should go. So most of us can look at that, and we don't necessarily see or need to see the raw data. We could look at a chart and say, oh yeah, that's not really the way I want my cash to be tracking. And so here's another picture of what cash is doing. And so, you know, again, a red line sloping down like that, most people would look at that and say, yeah, that doesn't really, that's not a good feeling when you're talking about your bank balance. And so the idea here is there's a couple hundred of these that you could plug into the system if you wanted to, and be able to show people just in graphical format what some of the underlying data looks like. And so, well, that's good if you're a Dynamics GP user, which, you know, some of us are, many of us are not. A lot of times people need to see this information that would have no access really to the system other than what we provide them. And so let me go back to my cash graph here. And so we'll kind of keep that one up. And so, well, Microsoft realizes that, you know, we don't all have GP user accounts. But we probably all have access to a browser of sorts, whether it's Chrome or Internet Explorer, Firefox. And so here's my GP 2018 folder, and you'll notice now that I'm drilling through some data from my browser. And again, security is already handled, so this is not just open data. I've already authenticated in to this data. And so here are the folders, or the different pieces of the software that I'm using. Well, we're in financial, and of course I've got a number of reports here that I could run. So if I wanted to run a trial balance on my GP general ledger through the browser, easily done. There's some fixed asset information. And again, there's a couple hundred of these that are out of the box, and that's what you're seeing is just out of the box stuff, but there's no limit on how many of these we could build. And of course you could copy and save as, and create your own versions of things that are already done here. But here's my charts and graphs for just my financial series. And my cash position detail, I think, is really, I think it is this one. Okay, well, I was pretty sure it was one of those. So, all right, well, I see the problem. It's reading my computer date, and my accounting system date is way in the future, up into 2027. And so if I do that, then I'll see the cash as it is. And so what you see here side by side is the same information, whether I'm looking at it through a browser or actually in my GP system. So, well, why would I want to look at it through a browser when I can see it in GP? Well, you probably wouldn't, but you might have the boss, so to speak, that is not a GP user. They might be out traveling the countryside and carrying an iPhone or an iPad or an Android device. Well, because this runs through a browser, any browser, we can show them this level of detail or this data on their mobile device. And so we could be looking at this on my iPhone if I'm at a convention at a hotel, as long as I have a connection back to the office, and I can get real-time and live updates of what's happening under the hood back in the system without having to call accounting and bother people and, you know, asking for reports or Excel files to be updated and so forth. And so that's really what that whole plug-in piece is for. It's better, probably more useful outside of the system than it is in, but certainly you can plug that in as well. And so, okay, kind of coming down, and I'm going to force this page to refresh just by toggling off and back on. And when I come back on, then it does actually bring my 1099 demo list up. And so before we leave that. And so with a click, I can go back and see that data. And as long as there's data on the list, as long as I have at least one problem, then this will show up on my home page. And so same idea here. We can use Microsoft Word. We could send out a letter to these folks saying, hey, send me your W-9. It's attached. I happen to know there was a W-9 request out of the box. But again, you could create unlimited letter templates here for your vendors, customers, employees, whatever it might be. And so we'll go ahead and not necessarily do that since we looked at one already. So kind of coming down to the reporting area, well, those reports that you run on a regular basis can be brought onto your home page, and with one click, the report actually generated. So you don't have to remember where that was on some menu and how to get to it, and you're click, 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 you know, for an hour to try to find the report. With one click, you bring that onto your home page, you run that, and in this case, it's aged payables. So here's my AP that's due, sitting out there waiting to be paid, and lots of activity here. Most of mine is pretty outdated, and of course all the reports, you know, have totals on them and so on. This is what I'd call a more traditional style report, And so traditional meaning that there's not drill back from this report itself. This is one way to look at the data. SmartList, which we looked at for the 1099 information, that's another way to look at the data. We looked at the data in the browser, on the dashboard on my home page. That's yet another way to look at data. But this report is kind of the hardcore accounting style reports. Anything that you see generated like this can be modified, can be emailed out. And so, and again, if you have the ability to create a PDF, which I do, that lights up. You could also send it out in text, although that doesn't look very good. But we could bundle this up into a PDF and ship this out to whomever it might need to go to through email. We can also print it. So I have my reports, of course, set to go to the screen so everybody can see them, but I could easily have this defaulted to the printer, or if I get something on the screen and I decide I want to send this out to be on paper, I can do that right from the report. And so so those things that you kind of quote print, whether it's screen or paper, you would pull onto your home page so that with one click you can get to that information. The quick links are exactly that. So those are menu choices that you work on every day. And so if you reconcile the bank account every day, you might bring that onto your home page so that you with one click have the ability to oops, I'm in 2027 now. And so this allows you again to get into the different parts of the system where you're working. And so here we'll open the bank rec screen. You'll see it doing just a little bit of a kind of an electronic reconcile there. It's looking for the downloaded file from my bank, which of course I don't have since this is all fictitious, but ideally I would download the transactions from the bank. Some people do it every day, some people do it every Friday, some people do it at the end of the month. Kind of the old-fashioned ways to reconcile at the end of the month, but most people reconcile every day or at least once a week now. You grab the transactions off the bank site and then you run the process that electronically looks at that file, comes in and ticks off deposits that are matched and any checks that are matched and so forth, and helps you reconcile that with minimal keystrokes. And so and of course you'll see I have a big difference here. So if I try to reconcile, you'll notice that yeah, you can't really reconcile when it's not in balance. And so we can enter transactions like interest income or service charges or things that maybe are in that bank file that we don't know about yet. So we need to get those into our banking system, kind of into our general ledger. And of course, the flip side of that is if we're going to enter something here, we need to give it a GL account. And so here's my account lookup. All the lookups function the same, whether it's inventory items or employees, if we're using payroll and HR, if we're using customers or vendors or projects, whatever it might be, the lookup screens all function the same way. And so here I can sort by account number. And I happen to be using kind of this 3-digit, 4-digit, 2-digit kind of department account and sub-account, or maybe division account, sub-account. Well, that's just an example. There's room for 66 alphanumeric characters in that account string, which is a little bit aggressive, but that is how large you can make it. And then you could have 10 segments or 9 dashes in there, so to speak, so that you'd have 10 different groups of accounts. Again, probably more than most people need, but that is the capability of it. So if I'm looking for something maybe down in the 200 area, well, if I do 200 and kind of tab off of that or enter off, the system sorts me down into the 200s. Well, maybe that's not it. And so I want really to sort by name. And so maybe I'm looking for bank charges. And so there's one. And so I just typed in bank and bank fees came up. And so I can select that. And then I put in, of course, the dollar amount of the bank charge, which I need to do. And so we're really never keying things in, customers, vendors, account information when we're looking for to post transactions. It's very rare that anyone would actually key that in, but you could. I mean, if you knew the account, you could key it in, but most of the time you're looking it up like that. So we'll just save that reconciliation, and I'll come back tomorrow or Monday when I am a little bit more focused, and hopefully I can get it to balance then. And so the quick links are those things that I work on ongoing, regular basis that I put. So this is kind of my own little shortcut menu. Again, one click, I'm into any window in the system. And so here's the kind of just the GL transaction entry. So if I'm going to go in and enter a journal entry, I'll show you one that is already entered. And so something like this that you can see if I expand the window there, I can see the name of the account. If I close it up, I can just see the number. That's really just to save space. You'll notice this one's entered in a foreign currency. So this one's in Canadian dollars instead of US dollars. And so Dynamics GP does handle any currency, including the euro, that we care to set up. And we can look at any transaction in any currency that we might have out there. And so that's easily done. And so here, if I want to see the transaction in some other currency, I can toggle between any currencies that I might have, and the system will display accordingly. And so this is good. If you just want to key an entry in, you could do that. But a lot of times you have a big entry, you don't necessarily want to key it in. Maybe you've done something over in Excel, and this isn't what I'd call a big entry by any means. This is a small entry, but you'll kind of get the idea. So I've kind of pre-created, maybe I've got a spreadsheet I'm doing bonus calculations, or I've done some kind of commission accrual or year-end adjustments or something that maybe I have adjustments from my CPA firm or my tax accountant that I need to get into the system, whatever it might be. And so, I could have a whole bunch of tabs down here supporting the entry and all that, but at some point, if I come up with just what the entry dollars would be, I can, as an option, come in and just, I've highlighted that, and so I can come in and copy that entry, and then I can come back into my GP system, into the window here, and I can paste that. And so let me make sure I've copied that, and the paste button should open up here. The paste is grayed out, so let me just reopen that window. And there it is. Okay. And so it senses that there's something on the clipboard, and so I can just quickly click the paste button there. And you'll see then, if I put the window and the journal entry side by side, you'll see that all it's done is just copied what I had highlighted and brought that in as an entry into the window. And so, yeah, this small one, you probably could key it in pretty quick, but imagine if you had, 20, 30, 40 lines, maybe 100 lines. If you have big entries, certainly you don't want to have to type that stuff in. There's always room for errors, and just, it's a waste of time. And so here I can go ahead and just put a description here. You'll see the red fields as I open these windows. Well, the red fields are required, and so we have to tell the system those things. And so once I put a little description in there, I'm ready to go. If I'm not quite sure about this and I want to save it in a batch, I can just create a batch there. I'll just put my initials on it, and I could put a description on the batch if I wanted to, but nothing needed there. And so that way I can come back and work on it later. And so maybe I come in another day, and I'm looking for, oh yeah, there's my batch. And so I can pull that up, and then I can get to the transactions that are in that batch. And so when I click on the lookup, then I haven't done quite enough setup here, but usually that would populate right up there for me. So I'm having to do a few more clicks, but you see there, it brings my entry back, and I'm ready to change it up, or maybe if I just want to delete the whole thing, I can, and start over type thing. So up to me. As long as it's in a batch, I have complete control over what we do with it. So talking about cash a little bit, I do have the ability to set up a cash flow kind of forecast. And so here's a calendar. We see here as we look at each month that anything that shows up in red is money going out, so more than money coming in. Blue is good, more money comes in than goes out, and then of course the black number is just the running cash balance. So if we flip over to May, I can see at a pretty quick glance here, I've got some money going out on Monday the 3rd. Here it looks like I'm expecting a lot of money in. Here's a little bit going out. Well, what is this 25,000 going out? What is that? Well, going out would be either payables, so I don't see anything there. Oh yes, okay. So here, someone has entered a transaction to go directly against the cash flow. So this is not a payable in the system, so there's nothing in there yet that the cash flow system would pick up. But here I've actually entered an equipment purchase, and I can drill down on that. And so I see that on May 3rd, I'm expecting to buy a piece of equipment, so that's going to be a negative 25. Well, on May 15th, you'll see I'm expecting a $40,000 line of credit draw. So again, there's not a receivable in there for that. And so those things that just affect cash like that, I could go in and manually put in the system. And of course, I can toggle through the different dates. And if I come up here and go to the 15th, you'll see there, in fact, my line of credit draw then does show up. And of course, I can see other things that are happening. And so if there's any accounts payable that are going to be paid that day, there's something going out on the 21st here. And so if we grab that, okay, so you'll see on the cash flow calendar, I'm expecting a negative $125 net to be spent. Well, here are the two transactions I'm scheduled to pay on 5/21, these two vendors, which equals the 125. And so some folks use this to kind of look through what cash might be doing. And so again, it's kind of forward looking. We know what cash is today, but this kind of looks into the future for us as kind of a little light forecasting tool that again I have on my home page. So let's go back to the customer setup. So here's a traditional kind of master record. So this could be customer or vendor, but I've selected the customer here. So not a lot of red. Red is required, but not a lot of red. But here we collect a lot of demographics about the customer. And so, you know, the accounts that get used when we do business with this customer, the addresses. Some customers, you know, have multiple addresses, and so here's a primary address, and then here's a warehouse address. So we can have unlimited addresses for each customer, and of course contact information, phone, fax, and so forth for a customer would be different if it's a different address. And you know, kind of what the payment terms are, and you know, if we have anything special for the customer that we want to handle, maybe we want to email statements out instead of mail statements, and so we can set up the email here so that when statements go out, the system just sends an email instead of printing one that we have to drop in the mail. And of course, then we can set up all of our email for other documents, and so like orders, quotes, invoices, and so forth. So when those documents flow through the system, the customer is electronically delivered the document instead of a printed copy. And Microsoft does support 4 different document types. Of course, the DocX is Word, and it's Word, but it's locked down Word, so somebody can't change it. What you don't want to do is send a customer a Word document of a nice invoice and then type over your numbers and fix your totals to their own liking. That wouldn't be good, and so it is a protected Word document, but it prints in Word. HTML, of course, would open in any browser, just if you weren't sure what the customer had. PDF is the common one, and then XPS, of course, is the Microsoft version of a PDF. But so lots of options there on documentation and so forth. The one thing that I did want to show here though is if we are looking at a customer, we kind of their master record, we can look at their transactions, and we do that in this what's called an all-in-one view. And this is for sales. There's one for inventory. There's one for payables, for vendor transactions as well. But this pulls everything there is about that customer transaction-wise into the window. So we can see quotes that were sent out, we can see orders, we can see invoices, we can see any money we've collected. If we've had to do a return or a credit to the customer, we can do that as well. And the blue allows me to drill down. And so if I want to drill down on this particular invoice, I can drill back on that and take a look at it. Of course, from there, I could email another copy, or I could print a copy if I needed to. But the idea is that we're not getting up and running to file cabinets and trying to thumb through paper and so on. That you could do that, but there's really not a reason to do that with Microsoft Dynamics. And so that's part of the power, is being able to drill down on any of these documents. The real power in this window is to be able to see which documents are actually hooked together. So of these orders, well, where did that order actually get paid? I mean, or the quote. If the quote turned into an order that turned into an invoice that eventually got paid, well, you want to see all those things kind of hooked together. And so if I just tick off, let's say this payment number 224 here, so I can see that when I do that, the system clears the screen to the left of the column I'm in, and we see the customer actually paid us $383.29. Of course, I can take a peek with the down arrow here, and I can see a little bit of detail about that. And the payment was cash, and it went into this Uptown Trust bank account. That's the one I started the reconciliation on. Of course, no discounts or anything like that. But when I tick that off, I can then look backwards and see, okay, well, this payment was for this invoice, so and this invoice was for this order. And so I have the ability then to see all of the documents that are connected. And so if, I did that from the payment, but I could do that from the left side too. So if I say, well, this was 2203, I think I should have ticked it before I closed it down here. So let me tick that one off again. And I want to see, hey, where was this invoice paid? Well, when I tick the invoice, then it shows me all the documents that are hooked or related to that. And so I can see here what the story is. And so now you might be noticing that there's a difference between the invoice amount and the cash receipt amount here. And so we see that it was $383.29. Well, the invoice amount was $358, but you see there's some sales tax on there for $25.09. And so, you know, the story is all complete right here at our fingertips with just a few clicks. We don't have to, you know, hopefully go ask anyone or say, hey, what happened with this, or why was that? And hopefully everything is right here that we need. If I want to see this return, well, what did that return get applied to? Well, nothing yet. So that return is kind of pending out there. We don't have an invoice that return was connected to yet. And so, and again, in kind of a demo data world, sometimes those things can happen there. We could also send a letter to this customer. So again, we kind of have this letter writing ability here. And we could take some action against that. And so here's a number of things. We looked earlier at the adjustment to the credit limit letter. We could have unlimited letter templates here of our own. And so we could do that directly from the customer screen here as well, if we wanted to. And so the homepage really is designed for us to do everything that we need to do on a regular basis right from our homepage. And so, you know, if we have employees and we're actually doing payroll in the system, we could have an employee log in to enter their time. There's a really light type of user that only allows an employee to go in and put time in and to kind of see their information. Maybe they want to see their benefits. And so with a click, that employee could come into the system with that real kind of light type user and see what their benefits are. They could update their direct deposit information. Of course, this goes into workflow that has to be approved before it becomes permanent. The employee doesn't necessarily have to deal with that, but it doesn't just automatically update things and no one knows about it. And so if the employee says, hey, I just want to get off direct deposit, I want to go back to a check, they can come in and just stop their direct deposit. And then of course someone would approve that in HR or payroll, and then it would become final. So maybe the employee's buying some new furniture this weekend, and they're at the store in finance, and they need a copy of their last few check stubs, and so well, that's fine, but it's Saturday afternoon and there's nobody at the office, and so there they sit. Well, no, they don't have to. They could get right in on their iPad or their phone and log right into the system. They would see all of their pay information here. Of course, this is all direct deposit information, so this employee is not getting a check per se, but they could come in and reprint any, sometimes they ask for your last 2 or 3 pay stubs, so they could do that and maybe print that off, or maybe from the system they could email that right out to the finance person, and then they're done. They don't have to bother anybody or wait till Monday type thing when the office is open again. And so makes the idea is it makes people very productive and not have to rely on a bunch of other people sometimes to get to the data that they need. Purchasing down at the bottom here, we have the ability to enter requisitions. You see I've got a requisition in there that's saved, just called computer stuff. Well, that sounds kind of fishy, so we better drill into that. And sure enough, I've entered a requisition here. So not a lot of requirements, a requisition number and a date, and the system assigned those. So not a lot for me to do. I put in everything I can. Here I don't even know the vendor. I left that blank. I don't know where they're going to buy it. I just know that I need it. It's not a Lenovo, but a Lenovo 1234 computer. I'm asking for a couple of those and charge it to my budget here, this particular GL account. This goes into the workflow. So again, someone has to approve this, and then ultimately, if it is approved, it will turn into a purchase order without rekeying anything. Well, maybe I want to keep a copy of this, and so I'm gonna, before I submit this for approval, I'm just gonna print off just kind of a simple copy of the requisition, and I'll keep that in my desk drawer so I can refer back to it if I need to. So again, same idea up here, print, mail, and so forth on the reports. But once that goes into the workflow and is approved, then I'll be notified that, hey, your requisition is being purchased, and if I'm a GP user, I could log in and see that on my homepage. And so lastly here, I just wanted to kind of take a look at the workflow. I don't have much of this set up because this does take some server products, and I'm running this on my laptop here. And so what types of workflow do we have? Well, GL account approval, so if you want control over people adding accounts to the system. Batch approvals, so somebody's going to post something in the GL, just a journal entry. Well, you might want somebody to take a look at that and approve it. And again, the workflow, the power of the workflow is that the approvals are done outside of the system. And so, of course, they can be done in the system, but most of the time people that approve, they just want to get an email, they see the transactions, they might see an edit list report, and they do that right in their email, and they have the buttons to approve, reject it, or maybe they want to delegate it to someone else because they're busy and can't get to it, and you're kind of chomping to get this posted today before you leave. So lots of things there. We can approve receivables batches before they're posted. On purchasing, that's where the bulk of the workflow ends up. We can approve purchase orders, of course. We can approve payables transactions. We can approve payables batches. The requisitions that I just looked at for my computer stuff, those do require an approval, at least one. We can approve vendors, so if we're adding vendors to the system, that's kind of a big control. We want to make sure that everybody that needs to knows about new vendors, and we don't have vendors being set up that aren't real vendors, or maybe my spouse, and so I'm going to put invoices in and funnel checks back to me. So you read about that or see that stuff on TV. Well, the workflow is designed to help eliminate all of that. Of course, around payroll, we have workflow set up. as well. So as people do make changes to the system, that the workflow kicks in, and whether we're collecting time or approving direct deposit changes, and so on, I could go in and enter a new skill that I've just achieved. Well, we want the HR manager to look at that to make sure that you know, everything's documented, and if there's a license or a certification or something, that we know how that goes and when that expires and so on. And then there's some workflow around project. So if we have project accounting requirements, people putting time and expenses to projects also have the ability to end up needing workflow approvals. So, so I've kind of stayed on my home page. I can move off of my home page if I want to work in the purchasing area. So purchase orders, accounts payable transactions, 1099 printing, and so on at the end of the year. I can move off of my home page and move into kind of the modules, so to speak. Everything is pulled onto the page. So again, it's one click away. If I need to work on a vendor address change, you know, one click, I can open the vendor card and do what I need to do here. So I'll see if I have any vendors that start with Z. Nope, but I have a W. And so, you know, I could come in and make whatever changes to the vendor and be done with that. So again, very strong security model that is not being used today. So everything's wide open, but you kind of see the core components of the system with finance, sales, purchasing, inventory. We didn't talk too much about, but full inventory system, HR and payroll, project, field service. So if we have people out in the field and we're doing service call type work, we do have a service module as well. And so this has a lot of moving parts, so you'll see a lot of busyness to the windows because we can track a lot of things. Remember, the red things are required, everything else is optional. If there's stuff you don't want to use on a screen or a window, well, those can all be taken off. So you can clean the windows up to your own liking. If there's stuff there that you would just never use, well, let's just get rid of it. And so, but what you're saying is kind of the way it comes from the factory, so to speak, from Microsoft. But I think that's probably about all the time we have for a really, really quick overview of Dynamics GP 2018. But Mandy, do we have questions in the queue that we should address?
We do. We have a few, so we'll go through some of these. The first question is, can we load a simple accounts payable batch from an Excel spreadsheet? Distribution to one expense account and one AP account.
Yes, you could do that. It's not as easy as the copy and paste that I showed, but we do have tools to bring data in. So if you're entering an accounts payable transaction, and you know, you can certainly key it in, but you can import these in mass with the integration tools, and there's 2 or 3 that we have available to pick from that are Microsoft products, and so absolutely, and many, many people do that.
Okay. Would you discuss document attachment to general ledger transactions, payable transactions, etc.?
Yep, so good question. GP 2018, as well as some of the other versions of the software, do have the ability to attach documents to transactions or master records. And so here's the document attachment window. Well, this is kind of the old school window, and why would you need this one? Well, you might want to type some notes on the transaction, and you could do that and attach those. You'll see the little piece of paper there, kind of has lines on it now. That means a year from now or 10 years from now, when you're looking at this, you'll know there's something back there and you can go look. So that's one way to kind of document things. The other kind of more modern way is to click on the little paper clip there, and that opens the document attachment window where you can attach documents that are out already in electronic format, and that could be Excel, it could be Word, anything electronic you can attach. So there's no restrictions whatsoever. If maybe on a vendor, you know, I might want to put a W-9, and so I usually have our real W-9 here in my folder, but I might have moved it. But anyway, anything that is electronic can be attached. you'll notice that you can also scan directly into the document attached window. So if you've got something, maybe it's a contract, or in this case, it could be a journal entry from your CPA. Well, you certainly want a copy of that on that transaction so that they know that you put in exactly the way they wrote it, type thing. And so you can scan directly into the window as well and make those a permanent part of the transaction or the master record. And that works virtually throughout the system now.
Okay. Can you add multiple addresses for vendors as well?
Yes, customers and vendors have unlimited addresses on both of those, absolutely.
Okay. On bank reconciliations, will you be able to back it out after you've already reconciled it?
Well, that's a little bit harder, because the idea is that if it's reconciled, it actually cleared your bank. And so there is a way to do that. But the theory is from Microsoft is if it cleared your bank, you probably are not going to mark it void because it actually went through the account. But there are ways to make changes, and so yes, you could do that with some offset transactions and so on. We do see that from time to time for sure.
Okay. In a bank reconciliation, will you be able to sort by amount, date, etc.?
Yep. So if I go back into my Uptown Trust here and let that electronic, and so here's the sorting. I can sort by type. So, you know, check deposit by date, by payment, by deposit, and then within that, ascending or descending. And so, yep, absolutely. And let me just resort it there. So, yeah, lots of different sort options now in all of the windows.
Okay. And then looks like this is our last question. Is the quick links new to GP 2018, or is it available now?
It is not new, and so that should be available on any version in the last, well, since version 10, 2010 for sure, but you should be able to do that today.
Okay. Perfect.
Assuming that's what we're talking about over here on some of these links. But yes, those, the quick link page, yeah, 2013 for sure. 2010 had a lot of this, but yeah, you should be able to do those today.
Okay. Great. I don't think there are any other questions. So thank you, Bryan. Thank you, everyone, for attending the presentation today. And if you do have any questions that come up, please feel free to reach out to us either at info@interdynbmi.com, or I know some of you may work with Tridea on our Tridea side. You can email us at info@trideapartners.com. You'll also see a follow-up email from me with some other important links and the link to the recording for this webinar. So keep your eyes out for that, and you can reach out to us if you do have questions. So thanks again, and everyone have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Mandy. Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye.